Welcome back, folks. It's time for our next 6 PPC video. A quick recap of this series. I've got my grandpa's old 6 PPC bench rest rifle. In the last 2 videos, we've loaded up a few rounds, but a lot of it has been shooting through his old stockpile of loaded ammunition. In the last video, we shot what I consider a pretty darn impressive target, and that was with ammunition that my grandfather had loaded. Now it's time to see if we can duplicate his results. Now, unfortunately, his favorite bullet was the Uber bullet, and apparently the gentleman who made those bullets has passed away, and they're not available anymore. So what we're going to be switching over to is the 68 grain Bart's bullet. Here's the box they came in, Bart's custom bullets. These are the 68 grain flat base Ultra, and I've got a bunch of these. Well, this was originally a box of 500, and my grandfather had broken them down into separate boxes, and I think at the point that he stopped shooting, he just hadn't shot that many of these, because looking back in his notes, he was mainly shooting that Uber, so not a lot of data to go from in his notes on the Barts. So we're kind of starting from scratch here, but these bullets are extremely similar to the others. I think back in the first video I showed this Bart's bullet, the Uber bullet, there's an Ulrich bullet, and there's even a Berger 68 grain bullet. They're all very similar flat base bullets that are used in these 6 PPC bench rest rifles. The powder I want to try out today is VihtaVuori N133. These bench rest guys seem to use N133 and H332 and LT32 and a little bit of Benchmark and some 8208 XBR. I saw in my grandpa's notes he had shot some Reloader 7 at one point. So there's a little bit of powder variety, but it's kind of limited to those 4 or 5 powders that everybody shoots. And N133 seems to be one of the best. So that's what we're going to give a try. Now, the confusing part of this has been trying to figure out what sort of loads I should use, because looking back through my grandfather's notes, most of his shots with N133 were at 28.8 grains. And just looking at like the Berger manual, the Hornady manual, the Sierra manual, and the VihtaVuori website, that charge is significantly over the max. And my grandfather wasn't one to go, exceeding max and doing anything dangerous. So it's been a little bit confusing here. I don't know why he was shooting a charge that high. So what I've decided to do is go with the VihtaVuori data on their website. They actually show load data with that Uber bullet that my grandfather really liked. They show a starting charge of 25.2 and a max of 28.2. So I want to kind of shoot within that. I want to shoot 25.8 up to 27.0. So we're a full 1.8 grains of powder below what my grandfather had been shooting previously with this, and moving down into the realm of what I see in the load manuals and the load data provided by the powder manufacturers. So we'll just see what happens. I only want to load 25 shots today. Let's just load up a few, let's go out and shoot them and see what happens, and then we'll work from there. I pulled out the overall length gauge and had a look to see our max overall length in this gun with this bullet. And with the bullet comparator, it's right around 1.735 is about the number I was getting. So I want to back off that just a touch. We'll shoot 1.730. So we'll have 4 or 5, 6 thousandths of jump to the lands, somewhere in that range. Now, we've emptied out a bunch of brass, and most of what I've got is Norma. I've got some Lapua and I've got some Norma. Today I want to shoot Norma. And what I'm thinking is that if we start seeing success here and things seem to be okay, like we're shooting some decent groups with the new bullet and this old batch of brass, I think I'll go ahead and buy a new batch of brass, just so I'm starting from, square one. We'll go through the full brass prep operation. Well, if we buy a Lapua, we've got to form it down from 220 Russian to 6 PPC. Or if we buy Norma, it's already, 6 PPC brass. But this barrel has a tight chamber, so we're going to need to neck turn and all of that stuff. So I think that's kind of the next challenge. We'll start out here. We'll see if we can get some decent groups, and then maybe we'll move on to prepping a new set of brass here in the next couple videos. I don't know. We'll see how today goes. Now, looking back through my grandpa's notes, his normal brass prep was to use a Redding body die to bump the shoulder just a touch before we do the loading process that I showed in the first 6 PPC video. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll pull out the Redding body die, we'll bump the shoulder, and it's not like my normal videos where maybe we're bumping the shoulder 3 thousandths or 5 thousandths or something. I just barely want to touch these shoulders. and then we'll move on to the rest of the reloading process. So I think we're ready for that. I mean, I've got 25 pieces of brass pulled out, and I've also got 5 more so that we can just load up some siders, some fouling shots, and that should be a good little test for today. So let's head to the press and bump these shoulders. So as I mentioned, we're going to use a Redding body die. This is basically it's like a fooling sizing die that doesn't actually size the neck. Like, yeah, you can see the neck is smaller than the upper part of this die. So we're just touching the body and the shoulder. And like I mentioned, we'll try and set it up for maybe 1/1000th of an inch of bump. We shouldn't need much, I wouldn't think. So let's start out there. The shell holder is not touching the die at all. Like, it's a little bit off the shell holder, maybe a quarter turn off the shell holder. I'm going to use a light coating of Redding Imperial Sizing Die Wax. Just a little bit, just a light coat so we don't get a case stuck. And let's see, I need to take a before measurement. I'm using the Hornady Headspace Comparator Kit, and this is the B350 insert. It seemed to be the one that fit this 6 PPC shoulder the best. Yeah, and going through a couple of these, looks like 1.143 and yeah, 1.1435 is what I'm seeing the most. So let's see if we can take it to 1.142. So here's the first one up into there. Not a whole lot of work going on there, it doesn't seem like. That's good. Yep, and we haven't touched the shoulder yet. 1.1435. I better write that down before I forget it. All right, so down on the die just a little bit and back through one more time. Holy crap, I think I nailed it. Let me tighten that down before something happens. 1.1420. Fantastic. Let's move on to another piece and see. Yeah, this one's reading about 1.144. So up and in, down and out. Let's see what we get. It's looking like 1.143. So it bumped it 1/1000th of an inch, but it's about a 1/2,000th longer than that last piece was. This next piece is starting at 1.1435. And let's see what we get with this one. Yeah, this one doesn't seem to have hit it too much. Like, if I hold it just right, I can get a 1.1430, but it doesn't really seem to have changed. Let me see if my lock ring's loose enough to where I can just tweak it a touch without needing to loosen the whole thing. And not really. Let's try that. Hopefully just a little bit of a tweak. Yeah, now it hit that guy. 1.1425, so we bumped this guy 1/1000th. So let me go back to the other 2 pieces that I already did and run those through one more time. Yeah, so my readings are varying a little bit. Like, this guy is at 1.1415, so that's about 2/1000th. So I'm not really getting the same exact number out of the die that I would expect. And that tells me maybe this brass needs annealed. Like, maybe it's work hardened and some of them are springing back a little bit more than others. I don't know, but I think this setting's good. I think we'll go with this. So I'm going to run these 30 pieces through this die setting, and then at that point we're pretty much ready to start our normal reloading process, which I guess neck sizing would be next. Okay, so now that the body of our cases is sized, now it's time to move on to the arbor press and size the neck. Hopefully you guys remember this guy from back in the first video we did. This is the L.E. Wilson neck sizing die. I went into a lot of detail on it in that video, so I'm not going to bore you with it again, but we put the case right down in there. Then we set it under the arbor press and push it down until it's flush. So now our case is all the way in there, and the little decapping rod thingy is kind of stuck up this way, so we flip it over and give it a little bump from this direction to break the case loose. And then out it comes. So now you can see on the neck where the bushing went down and sized that upper part, and we're ready for primer, powder, and bullet at this point. So I need to run through all of these guys and do that same operation. I kind of like the arbor press. L.E. Wilson makes these dies for lots of different cartridges, and I'm thinking about maybe picking some up for some other stuff we reload. Like, I'm curious whether there would be any advantage to this, especially the bullet seating portion, because the case and the bullet gets held in perfect alignment as the bullet is seated. But this this neck sizing operation seems pretty precise as well. And once you get in your flow, it actually goes very fast. So it's a pretty cool little process. All right, so I skipped past the priming and powder weighing stages, and we're ready for bullet seating. We've got another L.E. Wilson die here that's used for bullet seating. Yeah, you notice that little set screw right there, and then there's an adjustment screw down in there. Well, that sets our bullet seating depth. And in our previous video, this die was already set up, so we didn't have to mess with it. But today, switching to a new bullet, we're going to need to do a little bit of adjustment. Now, one thing that people had told me I was doing wrong in the previous video, in the past, I was pulling this is the seating stem. Yep, that's your bullet seating stem. I was pulling it out and dropping the bullet down through the hole and then putting this back on there. Apparently that is wrong. The fit between the main die body and this seating stem is so tight and so precise that you don't want to continuously, pull this out and put it back in for fear of boogering this up. So once this is in there, you shouldn't pull it out. You put the bullet in the bottom with the case. So that's the way we're going to do it today. Now, we're going to need to adjust our seating depth here. So let me loosen up the screw on the side. Yeah, we'll back that out about a turn, and then we should be able to adjust this. Yeah, tell you what, let's back it out a little bit and we'll start from there. So as I mentioned, I did weigh out 5 additional charges here for some sighters. So we'll use this to set our bullet seating, and like I mentioned, the bullet and the case go up through the bottom like that. So I screwed this down a little bit to where, with the bullet and the base here in the bottom, you can see a little bit of a gap. That should be enough to get the bullet started. So let's go ahead and put it under the arbor press and press that down in there just to see how things go here. Okay, so that's a little bit of a start. Let's see what our base to ogive number is right now. Our target is 1.730, and now we're at 1.7710, so still quite a bit long. So I'm going to continue to screw this down a little bit. Okay, that's half a turn. Let's see how much difference that's going to make. And press it down. All right, so our target's 1.730. We're at 1.743, so we're only 13 thousandths off. So I'm going to have to be a little bit smaller with the adjustments here. Let's see where that puts us. Go ahead and press it down. It's actually a pain in the butt to get the cartridge out of these. Like, it's such a tight fit that there's, the cartridge is sucked up in there. You kind of got to pull this up a little bit, and then there it went, finally. Oops, looks like I went a little bit too short on this guy, 1.727, so 3 thousandths too short. Let me back this screw out just a smidgen. Then I'm going to lightly tighten down the set screw on the side, and we'll see where that puts us on the next one. So, 3 thousandths too short, that's perfectly fine. We'll go ahead and shoot this as a sighter. No big deal, but we want to get the number correct on these next ones. So yeah, this is how I'm having to do it. You basically just jam the bullet and the case up into the bottom, sit it down on the base, and then press it down. It's taking a bit of force to get these guys started. There it went. Hopefully I didn't crush the neck. Nope, neck looks good. We'll see if I went out far enough. Well, crap, that one's even shorter. 1.725, so now we're 5 thousandths too short. Maybe tightening down the set screw somehow, messed with the thing. I don't know. So loosen the set screw, back that guy out just a touch, and then tighten it back up. Let's see what that does. We've got 3 more sighter rounds here to get this right before we start on our test rounds. So hopefully this is it. Okay, there it is seated. Pull it out. Pump this guy a little bit until it comes out. Man, still not quite there. 1.726, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm moving this a fair amount. So, loosening up the set screw, backing out the adjustment. All right, that's gotta be too much. That was like probably a 1/6 of a turn. That should be a bunch. So here goes nothing. Let's see if this got it right. Wow, that's actually just about right. I guess that adjustment inside that die is a little bit more fine than I thought it was. I wasn't making big enough adjustments. So 1.7305. So let's seat the last of our sighters here and see if we get a consistent measurement there. Okay, down it goes. Yep, that one's right on the money. 1.7300. Perfect. And like I mentioned, that ends up being an overall length of right about 2.160. All right, now it's time for the real ones. We'll check the first couple here. Overall length, right at 2.160, 2.161, very close. And cartridge base to ogive, right at 1.730. Yeah, you get the idea, right at 1.730. And of course, I bumped my tray a second ago, and now I got a couple granules of powder laying around. I don't know what frickin' cartridge they came from. And I'm not going back and reweighing them all. Few granules of powder won't make any difference. Or at least let's hope not. So I'm using the smallest of the neck die bushings because that's what my grandfather was most recently using. But these guys aren't seating very easily. I tell you what, let's take a neck tension measurement on this guy. So before seating a bullet, I'm getting a very consistent 0.2565. So let's seat one and then take an after measurement. I'm thinking I might need to go up to a slightly larger bushing just to make this seating a little bit easier. It's kind of being a little bit of a pain in the butt. It's just taking more force than I figure it probably should. Yeah, so now I'm getting a very consistent 0.260. So that's 3.5 thousandths of neck tension. I think that is a bit on the high side. So here in future videos, we might need to use some of the bigger bushings. I've got 3 different bushings, and this is the smallest of the 3. So playing around with those and having a look at the groups and figuring out which ones are actually shooting better might be something we need to dive into. So I think this is about it, folks. I just need to go through this process and seat the rest of these. And you guys have seen this process here, so I think that's about it. Let's go ahead and get out to the range. Okay, folks, let's get started. This is our rifle. It's a custom bench rest rifle, chambered in 6 PPC. It has a heart barrel that is 22 inches. The scope is a 36 power Weaver. And as you can tell, I've got my gigantic blaze orange lab radar chronograph out here that I'm hoping is going to collect velocity data for us today. I just got this thing. I'm still trying to learn how it works. So hopefully it works, but we'll just have to wait and see. The target is at 100 yards. And since the last video, I picked up some of the official IBS targets. I guess IBS is the sanctioning body for bench rest. It's like Intergalactic Bench Rest Shooters of the Universe or something like that. So if I ever decide to go to a match, these are the sorts of targets we're going to be shooting at. So now I've got to figure out on this new target, where do I aim? Like, what does my sight picture look like on these targets? I think the general idea is that you use the upper square as your aiming reference, and then you set up your scope so that your group lands down in the bullseye below. Maybe I've got that backwards, because now that I sit here and look through this 36 power scope, that big black square is gigantic. Like, I don't really see a good place to aim unless I maybe put my crosshairs, like line up the crosshairs on one of the vertical and horizontal sides of the square. That's probably what I'll try and do here. But let's start off with a couple sighters. I did clean the barrel, so the first one's going to be an oil shot. And then after that, we'll try and dial in our scope for this target. We're shooting at 100 yards. These first sighters, this is 26.4 grains of N133. This is our middle charge that we're going to be shooting today. So let's get started. All right, so we did get a velocity reading, 3104, and I was lining it up. I had my dot at the bottom left-hand corner of the square. So that seemed to work pretty well. Tell you what, let's have a look at this first piece of brass. I don't see anything weird going on. Let's go ahead and shoot another one at this same scope setting, since that last one was an oil shot, and then we'll make a scope adjustment. I am shooting this guy completely free recoil. The only part of my body touching the gun is my finger on the trigger. This is a 2-ounce jewel trigger. So that's why you'll see after the shot goes off, this guy is going to be sliding, you know, it slides back and forth nice and free in the bags. Okay, like I said, that is a 1-inch square. So let's come left half a minute. And the scope does have 1/8 minute clicks. Okay, that's 4 clicks left. And let's come down about 6 clicks and see where that puts us. I didn't get a velocity reading on the second shot because I'd been flapping my gum so long that the lab radar had stopped. It had disarmed itself. It's got a timeout. So that's something I'm going to have to either extend that timeout or get used to. All right, let's see if we're close to the bullseye now. Okay, that's pretty close. Shoot one more. Okay, let's go down one click and right one click, and we'll just call that close enough. Okay, one last warm-up shot. All right, perfect. Looks like we got our zero just about where we want it. So let me put the turret covers back on. And I need to go get a different memory card. Apparently this lab radar is having troubles reading the memory card I've got in it now, and it's not storing the shots, which isn't good. Okay, so I give up. I'm just gonna have to go buy a new memory card for this guy. So we'll just run without one. All right, it's time to start shooting for score here. Our first charge is 25.8 grains of N133. Let's see how they group. All right, so that's not a bad start. And the velocity numbers look really good. This is higher velocity than I thought we would see. This is 3,221 feet per second. The manuals had the velocity numbers a little bit lower than this, so I don't know what's going on there. But standard deviation of 5.9, extreme spread of 13, that is all good stuff. So let's move on. Next up, 26.1 grains. The brass is still looking good. The bolt lift wasn't difficult or anything weird like that. Velocity on that first shot was 32.59. All right. Man, those first three shots were stacking right in there. But it opened up just a touch. Still looks pretty darn good. Okay, moving right along. 26.4 grains is next. I keep catching myself lightly touching the gun with either my shoulder or my cheek, or leaving my hand on the rear bag or something like that. So this is it's a weird way of shooting to get used to, I guess. Yeah, so our velocity statistics are kind of going in the wrong direction here. These standard deviation numbers are getting worse. But I'm still pretty pleased so far, right? Brand new bullet that we haven't shot before, new powder. So pretty happy with how things are going. So let's move on. 26.7 grains is next. That's probably our biggest group so far. So we've got one more group to go. Last up, 27.0 grains. All right, well that's not a bad little target down there. We shot some decent groups compared to the last two videos. These are pretty close to those results. Tell you one thing for certain, I need a lot more practice here with these IBS targets. That was probably my biggest challenge today, was trying to get a really comfortable sight picture and feeling like I was aiming properly. It was a little bit of a challenge. So that's good stuff. All right, let's get back to the bench. Let's measure the groups and talk things through. So the brass looked great all day today. There's really nothing to show you, but we'll have a quick look just for the heck of it. Just good looking stuff, and they all look this way. So let's move on. Okay, so let's have another look at all the groups. The results were pretty darn consistent today, right? The top right-hand target, which was our second group, was the best of the day at 0.248, and the worst was the bottom middle at 0.323. And considering that I was getting used to this new target and a completely new sight picture, I think these, might have been a little bit tighter if I could have aimed better. So it's going to take a little bit of practice, but I'm very happy with today's groups. The velocities are a little bit higher than, well, the VihtaVuori load data predicted. The Sierra load data with their 70 grain bullet was a little bit higher and closer to the numbers that we got. So this might just be a fast barrel, and I'm not going to freak out too much because, like I mentioned earlier, my grandpa's old load with N133 was 28.8 grains, so a full 1.8 grains above our max charge for today. I think what we'll probably do in the next video is we'll take our best load from today, 26.1 grains, the top right-hand target. We'll take that load and we'll shoot some different overall lengths, see if we can tune in this seating depth. But these are just very promising results, for our very first time loading with the 68 grain Bart's Ultra, so I couldn't be happier. Another thing, well, I think I mentioned earlier, I feel like we're probably running a little bit too much neck tension. I don't want to switch up too many variables. Like, the next video, I either need to make it a neck tension test, like maybe we can use, I've got 3 bushings for the sizing die, maybe we can shoot some groups with different neck tension rather than doing overall length testing. I don't know. I'll think that over. There's certainly no shortage of stuff to test. And on top of that, I need a whole lot more rounds through this gun to get comfortable. And with this target, just to kind of feel like I'm doing my job, because today I feel like we did good and we shot some pretty good groups, but I feel like I can be better. So that's it, folks. Short and sweet here on the wrap up. Not much to say, so I will see you guys next time.